TGIF, it's a Friday, February 20th, 2026. When tragedy strikes, Wyoming knows to contact Grant Lawson and the law firm for truck safety, fierce advocate for justice and fighting for safer roads around the USA. Visit truckaccidents.com and see how Grant and his team make the difference. Well, the last three waves will be coming through today, tonight, into early tomorrow. Then the weather pattern settles down a little bit. Beautiful wild iris there coming up in the Missouri Ozarks. A tad early for sure. And it will be getting cold though, staying cold. It's a cold morning out there. We've got a lot of teens, single digits, and some sub-zero readings. It's going to stay cold with this next wave bringing a light to moderate snow event to Utah, a lot of Colorado, especially the mountains. Even some light snows will dust parts of Kansas and parts of southern Nebraska as that system moves out. But the last wave of the three, definitely the weaker of the three. But as we mentioned yesterday, it's going to put a fresh coat of powder on the ski slopes of Utah and Colorado for you skiers. That'll be good. Break in the waves will be occurring as we go into the weekend through Tuesday. Basically, we're going to see all of this wave pattern go into the eastern part of the United States, creating a storm, while high pressure builds over the Intermountain West as the next Pacific low just kind of parks itself off the west coast for a few days. Now we're going to see part of that jet stream pattern in the Pacific push into the Pacific Northwest and the Northern Rockies. As we showed you yesterday, it's an interesting pattern. Really strong jet stream winds cut across the Continental Divide. The bad news is we're probably going to have a wind event middle of next week. Hate to say it. I don't like saying it, but it's going to be a very windy Wednesday likely. Is it going to be on par with other wind events this winter? I don't think so, but it's still not going to be pleasant. It will drive Pacific moisture, though, into the high country. So one benefit will be some mountain snow, especially in the Northern Rockies with that system coming through on Wednesday. Some sundogs showing up in the cold weather yesterday. You can see one right there. Another photo with the cold and the ice crystals in the air. Sundog, a beautiful sundog situation. As the skies began to clear, we had the cirrostratus and the ice crystals in the air. And speaking of ice crystals, Jan Curtis picked up, in a time lapse again, ice pillars that you don't see when it's warm and dry like we've seen this winter. But when it does get cold and a little Arctic, you get those light pillars, as you can see here in the time lapse over the city of Cheyenne after the passage of the snow that came in overnight. So those are always neat to see, but you got to be in the single digits usually to be able to see those. And also some ice crystals in the air, the right setup. Nice snow, the best snow, well, I think maybe all season for central Wyoming there in the Casper area, the Wind River Valley, Lander, Riverton areas as well. Nice shot of snow. The water content was quite good. There were areas that got upwards of 0.4 to 1/2 inch of water. Now you might say, well, that's not a lot in the big picture. Well, it is for February to have water content like that. So it's the start of something at least. Starting from zero, we'll take anything. And good shot of snow up into the Gillette area as well. And a nice sunset over a very winter-like setting for a change across the region. And a nice shot of the planets and the stars coming out last night. Wave number 3, there it is. You can see the cloudiness over portions of Utah and western Colorado early this morning. There's a little swirl of the clouds right there. It doesn't have, as you can see, a good pipeline connection to subtropical moisture from the Pacific. So basically, what's going to happen with this upper level low, it's just going to take the moisture it has left with it. It doesn't have an inflow of moisture coming into it like the last systems have had. Nonetheless, as it cuts across the region today, it'll be across west central Colorado close to the noon hour before heading out into the plains. And it is going to stay very cold behind it. Temperatures will be quite chilly today, staying quite cold Saturday, and east of the Divide Sunday, staying quite cold as well. Here's the precipitation through tomorrow morning. So you can see the mountains and west of the Divide in Colorado and far eastern Utah will be picking up the brunt of precipitation today, tonight, and the Saturday morning. But as we told you, it's going to snow very, very lightly here. A little bit more here, maybe along and south of Interstate 70, but a light coating of snow for eastern Colorado and western Kansas. Not a lot of moisture, but when you don't have much, it's good to get really anything. But across the rest of the plain states in the west, kind of a pause in the action. That's what the snowfall looks like. So a good weekend to go skiing, play in the snow, as we've been mentioning. The avalanche danger in Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Idaho is very, very high. It's significant. Backcountry activities, you've got to be extremely careful. All you got to do is pay attention to the headlines of the avalanche conditions in California and what happened there. Be careful. Stay in bounds in the ski areas. And if you're a snowmobiler, you want to go play in that snow, be advised that we just have the perfect setup. We got a hard, crusty snow layer with a lot of new snow on top of it. Here's your high pressure ridge that builds in for Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. We're going to have a major storm system come together along the northeast coast of the United States, while a broad area of high pressure comes in as the next low coming out of Alaska and the Northwest Territories. Instead of coming down like this, it's going, nope, we're going to go out in the Pacific. We've seen this many, many times this winter. So it's going to spin there for a couple of days, allowing westerly flow, Pacific air, to come back into the region. But as we get into Wednesday of next week, we're going to have a piece of energy come down from Alaska and along the British Columbia coast while this system spins out there. The counterclockwise spin, as we showed you yesterday, feeds moisture into the system. But you see all the tight black lines here. That means winds aloft are very strong. And when you bring strong winds perpendicular to the Continental Divide, you have a windy situation developing. Here are the jet stream winds at 30,000 feet by Tuesday night. And look what happens by Wednesday afternoon. Very quickly, those strong jet stream winds come down and drop south of the interstate and cut across Colorado. Now, these will be moist jet stream winds, so they will produce snow in the mountains just from brute force. But on the plains, yeah, I know I don't like to show you this, but here we go. Wednesday of next week is going to be very windy across Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, into the Front Range of Colorado. I don't see this as a prolonged wind event, just giving you a heads up that it's coming. It will drive that moisture in to the Pacific Northwest. Wyoming's northwest mountains tend to do good. You tend to get a good shot of snow in this part of the mountain ranges as well. And then we're going to have on the north side of the jet stream wind, where there's going to be good divergence aloft, we're going to get a little bit of snowfall for parts of Montana and North Dakota as that streaks through, as you can see there. So this is the next weather maker coming in Tuesday night and into Wednesday. Then we'll just have to see what that low off the west coast does late next week and towards next weekend, if it wants to stay out there or come inland or not. I want to spend a little bit of time with where we are with La Nina, El Nino talk and what's going on in the Pacific. As we've been telling you, La Nina has been weakening. It's essentially gone. We can't call it a La Nina anymore. But I want to contrast where we are in the Pacific right now to where we were a year ago, because there's some differences. The maps won't show you much of a difference, but what's happening trend-wise with the sea surface temperature anomalies in the subtropics is different. And this is important, especially when we look ahead into March, April, and May. So this is where we were about a year ago, February 17th, 2025. We had colder sea surface temperature conditions in the central Pacific like we do now, and a warm patch of water here and a warm patch of water here. The difference is that at this point in time, those colder water temperatures in the central Pacific were growing and expanding eastward and westward. Basically, La Nina was forming at this time last year instead of dissipating, and that's a big difference. So if you compare to last year at the same time to this year at the same time, you can see the colder waters are weaker, and there's your warm here, and there's your warm here. So the trend is exactly 180. This La Nina is gone, going away. This La Nina was coming on and lasted through the first half of May, which resulted in a poor March, a poor April, and the first half of May was poor with precipitation in the west. But we have an opposite trend. Why is that important? Well, because what goes on in the Pacific is huge. Just to go back to some basics. normal trade winds, and when we mean normal, this means when there's not a La Nina or an El Nino in place, we're La Nada, we're somewhere in between. Generally speaking, you're going to have your surface winds or your trade winds on the top of the water, on the surface, that transports a lot of moist air masses, generally head this way. Those are the normal trade winds that sailors have relied on for centuries. When you have a La Nina situation, the trade winds strengthen, and the red color here represents the warmer subtropical moist air. Think moist. When you have a La Nina, the trade winds increase. They're still there, but they're stronger. So what tends to happen is the warm, moist air in a La Nina ends up on the western side of the hemisphere towards Australia, Indonesia, and Asia here. And then we tend to have the flow of moist air go to the other side of the Pacific. So the air on this side of the hemisphere is drier overall. That's why La Ninas are drier overall and cause other things to happen. But when the sea surface temperature anomaly begins to reverse, okay, you get this situation. When you have a full-fledged El Nino, the trade winds reverse. So what ends up happening, the warmer, moist subtropical air is pushed along the equator and into the southern hemisphere of South America and then into North America here. You have an opposite situation. So when we see the reversal in the Pacific starting, I'm not saying we have got an El Nino this spring. It's not going to happen. But the trend is going to be for these trade winds to, at times, what'll happen at times, we call it a SOI burst, a Southern Oscillation Index burst, to where you can have periods where the trade winds do reverse during spring. That is like a cattle prod to the atmosphere, and that tends to generate opportunity. I'm not saying it will. I'm saying it will generate opportunities for spring storms to develop more this year than last year because of what's going on with those sea surface temperature anomalies. Another way to represent this is if we were to look at average air pressure patterns, just like what we would say your barometric pressure is, and identify highs and lows. If we look at averaging 7-day periods together from, let's say, the 19th of February through the 26th of February, you see the blue. The blue represents where you're going to have low pressure, and the brighter colors is where you're going to have high pressure. And we want to pay attention to what's going on right here. So if we were to put highs and lows in place now, we have low pressure dominating over Australia and that part of the Pacific. And you see this area of brighter colors here, higher pressure on this side. Now, high pressure always moves air to low pressure. High pressure moves air to low pressure, high to low, high to low, high to low. So the general flow of the air is exactly what you'd expect. Over the next 7 days, it will be a La Nina situation to where you have those normal trade winds pushing the more warm, moist air to the other side of the Pacific. But if you look at the overall sea surface temperature conditions and temperatures and the changing water conditions and air pressures by the middle of March, it reverses. You see the yellow here? We get the high in Australia, and the blue low pressure is now off the coast of South America. This is what we call a SOI burst. So what will happen is there will be a period of time where we get these reversals. They don't set up permanently. That happens when you get a full-fledged El Nino. But these mid-March to April bursts, and if they can continue into May, do offer up some hope for spring storm activity in the West. Again, this is just a very general discussion, but it is encouraging in terms of getting precipitation going during those critical months of March, April, May, and into June. Don't forget our regional travel forecast, updated each afternoon, Monday through Fridays. Have yourself a great weekend.